everybody, and welcome back to my channel. Well, here we are at video 99. I can't believe I've made it this far. And as you recall, once we get to video 100, my viewer contest is over. Remember to send me those screenshots of your friends subscribing, and you can win a 30-minute Skype call with me. Now, you will have an extra week until we get to video 100 because there won't be any video next weekend. And that's because this coming week is a very short week for me because I'll be flying to Toronto for Buffer Festival, which if everything works out as well as I hope, that means video 100 is going to be kind of special. At the very least, you're going to get a very nice vlog of my trip to Toronto. And I'm not promising anything, but who knows, maybe there'll be a cameo by a famous YouTuber or two. However, for this week, I thought I'd give you a little story time with Maia about the time I crossed over from the magical divide between man and woman. Now, of course, from my perspective, I was a woman inside, even though I couldn't quite express it or really even realize that that's what I was feeling. That realization came along much later on in life, but clearly until I was 40 years old, the rest of the world saw me as a man. As weird as that is to contemplate now, because my old life seems more like a dream in some weird way. And you might even say quite traumatic, because it was not fun living like that. There were a lot of people that I love and a lot of things I love from my old life, but inside it was a living hell. But then came my transition, and in my case, a medical transition. And it was like the whole world opened up for me. Felt like I could finally take a big, deep breath out of life, and it just felt euphoric. I don't think there's any other way to describe it. Especially in those older days when I first started on hormone therapy with the estrogen, it very much felt like a high. But of course, even in those early days, the rest of the world didn't see me as a woman, and to be honest, I didn't venture out very often as a woman. And by very often, I mean not at all. I was way too scared to try anything like putting on makeup and clothes and going out into public. But then little things started happening to clue me in that maybe my transition was going to go pretty well. I'd go out in what I thought was boy mode, and people would start using feminine pronouns to address me. A couple times, even in customer service situations, people mistook me for my own wife. And I'm not really sure when that demarcation line was, when the whole world just started treating me as any other woman. But I know that just before that point, I started noticing some physical changes besides, like, you know, growing breasts. One of the most mysterious for me was that I started being able to smell men. And what I mean is not like bad odors or just kind of, you know, BO. And I certainly don't mean like masculine colognes or anything like that. I'm talking about their own personal body scent. It was not something I'd ever noticed before, but from like 20 feet away, sometimes I could like intensely smell masculinity on some guys. And to be honest, it's not all guys unless I get like really close. And I remember the first time it happened, I was running at night and some guy was like running towards me, and all of a sudden I could smell something kind of spicy. Kind of hard to describe actually, but it was clearly something different than anything else I'd smelled before. And I thought to myself, surely that smell isn't that guy. But as it got closer and closer, it got stronger and stronger until he was right on top of me, and I realized, yeah, it was totally him. And I was really shocked. I'm trying to recall because at this point it's almost 7 years ago, but I think it was about a couple months after I started on hormone therapy that I noticed this. And then later on, after I'd gone to move to Florida, I went out in a t-shirt and jeans and no makeup or anything. And it was dinner at a local restaurant with my mom and my grandmother. And my grandmother was quite feeble then and walking slowly, so my mom asked me to go ahead and ask the hostess to seat us at a seat close to the front door. And to myself, I was in boy mode. I was in no way trying to present as feminine. And I still remember to this day, the hostess turned around, talked to the waiter and said, "Hey, can you seat her somewhere close to the front door?" And I just stood there stunned. I didn't know what to say. I mean, I wasn't going to correct her, obviously, but in a way I felt like, wow, when did this happen? That's probably the closest thing to that demarcation line when I was just magically now feminine. And all of a sudden the world started seeing me as a woman, whether I was trying to be in boy mode or not. And then a few weeks after that, I remember going back to my old neighborhood in Houston and going running. And I hadn't yet collected any, I guess you might say, female running clothes. I remember my ex-wife making fun of me a little bit because it looked like I was wearing some guy's old gym clothes. But despite that, I was running down the block and this woman came running at me in the other direction. And from a lifetime of interacting with women in these public spaces, I didn't want to make her feel uncomfortable. So I didn't in any way try to make eye contact with her. But I did notice that as she got closer, she just started smiling at me in a way that was very engaging. And it was so different than what I had experienced before that it kind of almost brought me up short. And it wasn't kind of a flirty smile in any way, so I wasn't used to that either. And it was only after reviewing it in my head later that I realized it was a sisterhood smile. It was like, hey, there's another woman. I feel safer in this space because you're here. It actually reminded me of a much earlier incident. In fact, of the very first time I went out presenting as female back when I was living in Houston. It was my very first time, so I was petrified and I tried to avoid as many people as possible. I drove to this office building and parked in the parking garage because I needed to go pick up my hormones in the pharmacy on the first floor. And as I was getting out of my vehicle, a woman approached me in this parking garage asking me for directions for something. I think in my entire life, a woman had never approached me in a dark parking garage like that. And here she was with this totally relaxed attitude because she saw me as another woman. I was presenting much more feminine. I had makeup on and heels and everything. And then, of course, there was my interactions with men, which really taught me something about womanhood. First time it really stands out in my mind is something that happened probably 6 or 7 months after I started on hormones. If I remember correctly, it was quite late on a Saturday. I was running off to go to some like transgender support group dinner or something along those lines. So I was dressed up a little bit in a nice skirt and things, and I pulled up to this discount tire warehouse because I had this one tire that had a very slow leak, and I was hoping that they'd be able to patch it for me for free. So I walked inside and talked to the service manager, and I told him what was going on. He says, you know, it's really late. Why don't you come back on Monday and they'll be able to fix your tire for you. For now, if you pull your car around, one of my guys will fill it with air. So I was a little disappointed, but I pulled my car around as he asked, and as one of the service techs checked all my tires for air pressure, one of the other guys came up and stood right outside my window, and he just stood there, which I thought, to be honest, was kind of creepy. I had no idea what was going on. So I rolled my window down a little bit, I remember. And he was just trying to be cute, and he looked at me and he said, so what's wrong with your car? So I explained to him what was wrong, and again, just as happy as could be. He looked like an eager puppy, really. He asked me if it would be okay if he jacked up my car, took the tire, and fixed it for me. And so that's what he did. He got all industrious. He took the tire off, and I could see him through my windshield in the back there working on my tire, trying to figure out what was wrong with it. And after a while, he came back to my car, and he told me that he had found the problem. And this is about how he put it. He looks at me and he goes, yeah, I found the screw in the tire, and I pulled it out, and I wanted to show it to you, but then I dropped it down the drain by mistake. And I'm telling you, he did that face and everything. And I was like, oh my God, what is going on here? I mean, this is the first time I'd ever gotten this kind of treatment from a man at a garage ever in my entire life. And clearly I was not used to it, and I didn't really know how to handle it. So I was kind of like, oh, great, thanks. He put the tire back on the car and I drove off. Now that might sound awesome, like, wow, there are all these benefits to being a woman in these situations. But you know, for all the times I can think of where being a woman worked for me, I can also think of times when it didn't work for me at all. In fact, when I can say that it really held me back or discriminated against me. Because there was this time I brought my car to another garage and I wanted this guy to specifically tell me what was wrong with the brakes. And from the first interaction, he seemed kind of prickly, like, you don't really know what you're talking about. Because I told him what I thought was wrong with it based on my past experience with my car. And I left him with specific instructions to give me a call to let me know what was wrong before he did anything with the car. So a few hours later, I got this call from him that he had found what was wrong with it, and without consulting me, he had just gone ahead and fixed it. He didn't give me a chance to approve the repair, he didn't give me a chance to talk about it, nothing. And it felt so patronizing that I was incredibly insulted. And when I went back to the service center, I asked to speak to the manager and the manager's wife, and we sat there for probably 30 minutes to an hour, where I talked to him what really bothered me about it, how I felt I'd been discriminated against as a woman, and they were both sympathetic, but it really wasn't to my satisfaction the way they handled it. I'm not saying they didn't take me seriously, but there was clearly a different kind of relationship going on there than I was used to. It was not cool, and the incident bothered me so much I never went back to that chain entirely. And they're a pretty big chain here in Central Florida. And I could tell you of 1,000,001 other incidences that have happened like that too, where men clearly felt they knew better without consulting me in any way, and just started helping me without actually speaking to me. Little tiny things that don't seem like a big deal, but they pile up into microaggressions. They're not quite as capable as a man. Like the time I was pitching on a co-ed softball team and there was a pop-up by the pitcher's mound. I was planted underneath it and ready to catch it like I had done for the past 30 years of my life, when the third baseman, who was quite a tall man, ran over, basically snatched it out of the air right in front of my glove. Or the time I was pulling out of a sub shop and there was construction, you know, a little bit ways behind me, but I'd noticed it when I got in my car. And this guy just took it upon himself to jump behind my car and sort of start waving me like, you know, those air traffic controllers with an airplane, that and stop, you know. And I remember completely ignoring him and just zipping around him and pulling out in one swift, quick move, like I knew what I was doing. I remember the guy standing there and I looked back at my rearview mirror and he looked kind of dejected and kind of dumb. Some of you might say, well, that he was just being nice, but I didn't see him do it for any other guys. As those stories imply, I learned a lot about men, and with sexual assault and the rest being such a big topic this week, I thought maybe I would talk about that a little bit. The things I found out from the women in my life of how they'd been sexually assaulted just blew my mind. Guys, I'm telling you right now, even if you're a sensitive guy, even if you think you're open and awake to the world, you still don't know the half of it. As you can imagine, I was a very liberal guy. I was a very sensitive guy. But the stories I heard after my transition shocked me. I just could not believe how prevalent it was. At this point, I am not surprised. I am not shocked anymore, and I think that is the saddest thing in the world, that it doesn't surprise me. Get any group of women you can think of together, and if you really listen, you will hear story after story after story. I'm more surprised now if there's only one woman in the room who's had this experience. Usually it's multiple. And these survivors, they don't tell anybody, because women are treated very much like children, like we don't know what we're talking about, that it's in our imaginations. Even I have stories of things that have happened to me in the last 8 years. Nothing that rises to the level of anything that I would ever report to the police or the authorities. But being a woman in this society makes you vulnerable. Not just vulnerable in the moment of an assault, but vulnerable afterwards, and that you won't be believed. Although with all these stories coming out, that seems to be changing. And I'm hopeful for a future where stories of assault will become rare exceptions. And that when they do happen, that person will be believed and there will be swift justice. Wow. okay. I know this video kind of took a dark turn, but that's kind of what was in my heart this week. If you have any similar stories about that magical moment you crossed from the man-woman divide or the woman-to-man divide, and of course any other kind of Me Too stories that you feel you would like to share, please leave them in the comments below. I will read all of them, I promise. Don't forget to follow me on my socials, so all the links will be down below. And of course, don't forget about my viewer contest. No video next week, but I promise there'll be one in 2 weeks. And on that note, like, share, and subscribe, and see you around the interwebs.